Getting back to that comment, we don't have a strategy yet. We know that the president was talking about a strategy for ISIS in Syria, but having said that, would he like to have that one back?
Well, Jim, I want to clarify one thing of what you described. The president was talking specifically about military options for countering ISIS in Syria. There are a number of things that we've already done as it relates to the broader situation in Syria, to confront some of the challenges there. The United States, as we've discussed many times in this room, is the largest single donor of humanitarian aid to Syria in terms of dealing with the terrible humanitarian situation that has been caused by the violence in Syria. We've seen significant numbers, millions of people who've been displaced by the violence there. The United States has been engaged in an effort to support the moderate Syrian opposition. There are a range of ways in which that support is provided. There's also some diplomatic support that's been provided to them. So there already has been some work underway in Syria to try to address some of the challenges there. But the president was candid about the fact that the Pentagon is still reviewing options that may be available to him, military options that may be available to him to counter ISIL militarily in Syria.
But when you're the president, words matter. And just getting back to that first question, does he wish he had articulated that sentiment differently?
Well, Jim, he was asked a very specific question, and he was asked a question about.
Right. I mean.
Well, he was. But let me finish this. This is important. He was asked a very specific question about whether or not the president would seek a congressional authorization before ordering any sort of military action in Syria. And the point the president made was that that's putting the cart before the horse. The president hasn't yet laid out a specific plan for military action in Syria. And the reason for that is simply that the Pentagon is still developing that plan, and he's still reviewing them. And it would be putting the cart before the horse to talk about what sort of congressional authorization would be required for a plan that hasn't even been put in place yet.
I don't mean to belabor it, but the fact that you came out so quickly and tried to explain what the president had to say suggests that that what he said was not what he intended to say. Or are you saying that just the rest of us took it the wrong way?
Well, I think what I would say, yeah, I do know what you mean. The reaction that we had at the White House yesterday was not in response to the president's comments. It's in response to the way it was being reported. And I don't mean that to sound as a criticism of you all doing your jobs. You all have an important job to do. But we do believe that it's important for people, both you and your readers and viewers, to understand what message the president was trying to communicate and what strategy he has already laid out for confronting ISIL, and what decisions remain to be made as it relates to military options that are available to him in Syria. So again, that is not a critique of the media. It's just an observation that we didn't listen to the president's news conference and go formulate a strategy for responding. We listened to the president's news conference, watched your reporting, and recognized that if we wanted people to have a very clear understanding of what the president was trying to communicate, that we needed to engage you directly to do that. And that's what we tried to do.